What is most concerning about all of that to you?
So, at the fundamental level, we expect our elected officials to be responsive to the wills of the people. They should be accountable, they should be transparent. And so, to have an elected official who is dealing with questions that are related to his family, but not being willing to speak to the media, but instead putting out essentially a propaganda piece, that smacks as a direct circumvention of the role of the press in a democracy.
You said propaganda.
Yep.
Do you believe that's what this is here?
If you look at what propaganda is intended to do, it's intended to provide a pre-controlled message for the purposes of persuasion. And I think that's what the mayor's trying to do here. He's not trying to provide accountability. He's not trying to be transparent. He's trying to persuade voters or citizens that he doesn't need to answer questions because he said he doesn't need to. And frankly, in a democracy, that's not what we expect from our elected officials.
I'm assuming you've watched it.
Yep.
What did you take away from the tone of all?
It struck me that the mayor was, and at times somewhat flippant, other times dismissive, of what are really not out of bounds requests for information. It is not out of bounds to expect the executive of a city government to answer questions about very serious concerns involving a close family member. It struck me as odd that there would be an attempt to mimic all of the trappings of journalism to try to ape the credibility of journalism and use it for the effort of discounting journalism.
Yeah, I mean, it pretty much starts with, now you can choose to believe the media or you can believe me. That is your choice.
Yeah, that sort of framing, that antagonistic, you're getting lied to by the media, but I'll tell you the truth. I wish that was not a prevailing sentiment among elected officials, but it really creates this false dichotomy that somehow reported information can't be trusted, but the person who is directly involved in something should be trusted. That really doesn't pass the sniff test to me, and it isn't what we should expect from our officials.
How should this have been handled from a communication standpoint?
I think anytime a elected official has questions, whether they're personal or involving their office or their family, the expectation should be that they answer questions transparently and openly with the opportunity for follow-ups. I think the most troubling thing about this pseudo interview is that we have no idea if the questions were pre-screened. We have no idea if there were follow-up questions allowed. We have no idea if any of the questions that were asked were cut. So what we have is a prepackaged version of an interview, the best possible version that the mayor's office wants to put out. And instead of getting closer to the information that we need, closer to the truth, I think this completely fogs the public's understanding of where we need to be.
If I'm at home, I'll say, oh, well, why is this any of the media's business anyway? Are there legitimate issues here that should be addressed?
Absolutely. Asking questions is not determining guilt. It's asking questions. No one in a position of power should be above answering questions. The ability to ask questions of those in power is part of what makes representative democracy work. In this particular case, there are questions about the conduct of the mayor directly. To expect him not to answer questions about that, I mean, that belies belief. I mean, it's one thing if this was something that happened completely outside the mayor's jurisdiction, that there would be no possible ramifications that he could be involved or in some way influence it. But that's not the case. This is an instance where the mayor may or may not have been involved. That's not the point. The point is that he should not be skirting questions about it.
He has always fallen back on I don't talk about my family, this is a family issue. That's not necessarily the case here, is it?
Yeah. If it was just about his family, that would be one thing. But it's not just about his family, it's about his interaction with law enforcement in relation to his family that I think the public has a right to know about.
But he said, I had no interference at all.
Yeah.
I did nothing to interfere with any investigation.
Yeah. And that very well may be the case. But the expectation is that we don't take people at their word simply because they say that they're not lying to us. Journalism has always demanded evidence. The public should always expect from its elected officials that they don't just rely on us to trust them because they said something is true. There should be a higher standard than that.
You talked about that follow-up question and kind of that back and forth.
Yeah.
How key is that in a situation like this? Because on here, there appears to be none of it.
Yeah. Most politicians are really adept at answering questions. And so if you only give someone one question and they can rely on whatever predetermined answer they're going to give, you're not going to get very close to the truth. You need to be able to ask repeated follow-ups to try to get to the nuance of what's being discussed. Simply just saying, I didn't interfere and you should believe me because I said I didn't interfere, that just barely begins to scratch the surface of what the public should want to know. And not having that ability to dig into that is a real disservice to the people.
What do you think the purpose was behind this?
Propaganda. I think the mayor, for whatever reasons, whether they are above board or otherwise, the mayor does not want to answer questions involving this case or these cases. But unfortunately, if you choose to be elected mayor of a city, you don't get to choose when you answer questions and when you don't.
Should something like this be a red flag to people?
Absolutely. I think that any politician that is trying to circumvent accountability, whether or not they have cause to do so or not, causes you to question. It's a red flag that why would we not answer questions about something if there's nothing to hide? Now, that can be a slippery slope to say that, oh, you have nothing to hide. But if you're trying to push people to disbelieve what they're seeing in news reports, that to me is an acknowledgement that the person is trying to hide something. And we can tie that to federal level if you want to, because there's plenty there, but
Helicopters.
yeah. we can talk about Alabama. No, let's talk about Alabama.
Does this whole thing just leave you scratching your head?
It is a very strange turn of events. This is not some sort of flippant case that we're discussing here. I mean, the multiple incidents involving the mayor's grandson are not trivial concerns. To see a elected official try to use his own public relations team to avoid answering questions from the press on any case would be troubling. For something this serious is particularly notable, I think.
You know, they frame it as, you know, you can trust the media, you can trust me, but I sat down with a member of the media.
Yeah, I think to try to have it both ways, to try to tell people they shouldn't believe the media, not believe the press, but then use all of the appearances, all the trappings of the media to try to make the case that this is somehow not just propaganda. I think it's an attempt to deceive, plain and simple. You don't create the appearance of an interview, call it an interview, but have it be with a person who works on your staff.
With this, you saw the follow-up questions I sent. Were those out of line?
Absolutely not. I think to ask, you know, the fact that the mayor did this is notable in the first place. The fact that the mayor is not then going to answer questions about the extent to which that interview, the pseudo interview, was put together is even more concerning, because now we're utilizing, or the question is he utilizing taxpayer dollars for personal gain? That public relations team that put together the video does not work for the mayor. They work for the city of Cleveland. And just in the same sense that there should be accountability towards the questions involving the mayor's grandson, there should not be some attempt to stonewall information about how this attempted interview was put together as well.
There were reporters standing outside the mayor's office yesterday. I was among them, and we were told he was not going to interview on this. And then something like this appears the next day saying we shot this yesterday.
Yeah. A politician, an elected official that's going to avoid independent reporters to seek out either a public relations person or a pre-screened reporter to do a friendly interview is not trying to help the public understand something. They're trying to circumvent the public's understanding of something. The fact that there were reporters waiting to talk to the mayor and told that they couldn't interview him, but at the same time we now find the mayor was doing a essentially pseudo interview, it's hard to see that as anything other than dodging accountability.
Do you worry that this becomes the norm?
Yeah. no politician likes accountability. Mayors, governors, presidents have always wanted to avoid being asked tough questions. It's easier now than ever for them to do that by skipping over the news media and going directly to the people, in this case using YouTube. The ability to communicate directly with voters does not replace the important role that the press is supposed to play. The founders put the press in the Constitution for a reason, because just like there's checks and balances between the branches of Congress, there's supposed to be the ability for the people to ask questions of those we send to power. To circumvent that for personal gain or for at least personal reasons is the antithesis of what we should expect from our elected officials.
Should people be upset about this?
I think they should be. I think that the mayor trying to avoid answering questions and then using taxpayer dollars to do so should make everybody upset. It's not that you're upset because you think the mayor is implicated. That's not the point. The point is that the mayor works for all of us. And to not be willing to answer questions on behalf of the public is a dereliction of duty.
Do you worry this is going to become the blueprint for other politicians, other office holders, other people in high places?
Yeah. The mayor is certainly not the first person to think of this. I mean, if you look to Washington, it's been, I think we just passed the 6-month anniversary since we've had a presidential daily briefing in a traditional sense. It is startlingly easy for those in power to avoid answering questions from anybody who is going to be critical. I don't think that that's healthy for democracy. I don't think that's healthy for our belief or trust in those in power, and I don't think it's good for our system of government that people in power are able to avoid answering questions from those who put them there.
What can the public take away from all of this?
I think the public needs to look at this as what it is. It's an attempt to evade questions. And those questions that are being asked are not unreasonable. And so if you decide to make your own determinations, as the mayor recommended in the video, the situation is that the mayor is being asked reasonable questions, is seeking to evade them, and instead utilizing a public relations effort to obfuscate. I think that you can take from that what you will. It strikes me as trying to avoid answering questions.
Is this indicative of an open, transparent administration?
It's the complete opposite of an open, transparent administration. An administration that is willing to go to these lengths to avoid questions is an administration that is not attempting to keep the public informed about what it's doing.
What would you say to the mayor?
I think the mayor needs to now answer questions both that he was originally asked about the cases involving his grandson, but I think he needs to answer for why he was willing to go to this lengths to avoid answering those questions in the first place. We should expect more from those we put in office, and I think he needs to answer why this was how he felt was the best way to deal with this situation.
When you watch this, what questions as a journalism professor pop into your head?
I think what struck me about the style or the tone of the pseudo interview was that every question was taken at face value. A good journalist knows that just because someone says something doesn't mean you just take that as the answer and move on. I think the need in this, if this was a real interview, to dig further into these questions and to seek some explanation for the mayor's answers would be stuff we cover in Journalism 101. Just because someone tells you something doesn't mean you just go and repeat it. We're not stenographers, we're journalists. The expectation is there should be some degree of evidence. So when the mayor says, I didn't interfere, and I didn't interfere before, so I'm not going to interview now, that may be well and good as a statement, but it doesn't close the question. There should be more follow-up to that.
Do you wonder what got cut out, if anything?
Anytime you have a situation where the questions and the questioner is off camera and all we see is a title card instead, it does lead you to wonder, is there information that was either eliminated from the interview in the editing process, or even is the question that we were provided by the mayor's office actually the question that was asked? We simply don't know. And I think that's the heart of this issue, is that when you have the questions being answered by the same part of the government that is answering them, we can't know that they're doing it above board. And the whole concept of a free and independent press is that it is independent of those that they're asking questions of. This is a mockery of that entire idea.
Would you question if a legitimate journalist was involved in this?
It would strike me as being particularly odd that a person working as a professional journalist would see this and the participation in this as anything other than, at minimum, a bad decision, but also possibly a violation of journalistic ethics. There's 4 basic pillars, and one of them is be independent. If you miss that, it's hard to expect you to get anything else right.
Again, it's the media being unfair to the mayor, because I'm sure that'll be the claim in all of this. You know, oh, they're just out to paint me in a bad light, and
Right.
they have all these questions that none of their business when I told them I didn't interfere.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the claim that the media is just out to get somebody has much more resonance than it should. It strikes me as odd that we are more likely to believe someone who is accused of wrongdoing or accused of being involved in wrongdoing saying, I didn't do it, than the people who are asking questions in good faith. I think that's the crux of the mayor's opening statement in this video of, you can trust me or you can trust the media. I mean, that's setting up this antagonistic expectation that the media has somehow crossed a boundary. The media is trying to do its job in this case. The press is trying to hold those in power accountable. That's literally in the description. And so for the mayor to set this up as somehow crossing a line, I think it's disingenuous, but unfortunately I think it'll have some traction, because we've seen that attacks on the press have become part and parcel of our political communication, and there's segments of the voting populace that are inclined to believe that. They are welcome to believe that if they want, but this is not a case where the media, the press, is somehow acting in a way that's untoward. The media is trying to do its job. The mayor is the one who's not doing his job.
Are there legitimate questions about the handling of this case in your mind?
I think that there has been too much raised involving this case to expect it to be as simple as, I didn't interfere and we call it a day. Asking questions does not mean that somehow there's a predetermined belief that the mayor has done something wrong. That's not the point. The point is that we have to ask questions so that we can get closer to the truth. Simply having the mayor say, believe me, doesn't get us closer to the truth.